An arrest made in the nationwide bomb scare. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. Well, after 3 straight days of mail bomb discoveries, federal authorities have a man in custody. He's been charged with 5 different crimes, including illegal mailing of explosives. CBN National Security correspondent Eric Rosales has been following the developments. And Eric, what do we know about the suspect and the charges he faces?
Well, Jenna, his name is Cesar Sayoc. He's 56 years old and he lived in South Florida, just outside of Miami. Now, sources told me that the FBI actually had him under surveillance for the past 24 hours. Now, he's no stranger to law enforcement. He does have a criminal past, including threats of possessing explosive devices, fraud, even drug possession. And he had been a person on their radar. He now faces 5 counts. If convicted, faces up to 58 years in prison.
This is a law and order administration. We will not tolerate such lawlessness, especially not political violence.
We can confirm that 13 IEDs were sent to various individuals across the country. Each device consisted of roughly 6 inches of PVC pipe, a small clock, a battery, some wiring, and what is known as energetic material, which is essentially potential explosives and material that give off heat and energy through a reaction to heat, shock, or friction. Though we're still analyzing the devices in our laboratory, these are not hoax devices.
FBI Director Christopher Wray warned the public that more devices could be out there and more arrests could take place in this ongoing investigation. Jenna?
Eric, what are you hearing about how they exactly tracked down this man?
Well, sources told me that it was DNA off of one of the 12 envelopes and a fingerprint, and that information was confirmed at the news conference. It was DNA off of the envelope sent by Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and the fingerprint was found on one of the devices. Due to an arrest in Florida, the suspect was already in the system, and that came up as a match.
And Eric, what did the president have to say about all of this?
Well, speaking at the Young Black Leadership Conference, President Trump said that he does plan to bring the weight of the justice system on this suspect, and he applauded the work of federal authorities. Take a listen.
I want to applaud the FBI, Secret Service, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, the NYPD, and all law enforcement throughout the entire country, incredible partners. These people have worked so hard, and to have done it so quickly, it's looking like it's a needle in a haystack. How do you do this so quickly? They've done an incredible, incredible job, and I want to congratulate them.
Jenna, everyone's just calling it good police work.
All right, Eric Rosales, thank you very much.
You got
Well, ahead of the arrest today, President Trump took to Twitter to say the national bomb scare was slowing the momentum of Republicans heading into the midterm elections, saying politics weren't getting as much news coverage. For months, there have been talk of a blue wave of voters giving the House and the Senate back to Democrats. Now, though, with just 11 days to go, that is not so certain. Races are tightening up as voter enthusiasm has grown in Republicans' favor. A big reason is backlash following the Democrats' attacks on Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh during his confirmation.
The plants and factories are coming back like never before.
One reason for the recent change in polling is President Trump's nonstop campaigning. So far this month, he's visited 23 cities and plans another at least 10 rallies before Election Day. His appearances are being met with great enthusiasm. This Texas stadium packed with 18,000 supporters, while tens of thousands more wanted in. It's this enthusiasm that's giving Republicans increased confidence. One administration official tells us they think the president's campaigning and the Supreme Court confirmation of Justice Brett Kavanaugh will help them pick up a seat or 2 in the Senate. This same administration official also thinks the idea of a blue wave has been overblown. A GOP source on the ground tells CBN News they've seen a major enthusiasm shift because of the ugly Supreme Court battle over Kavanaugh. This source says it's making races in the toss-up states of Missouri, North Dakota, and Indiana much tighter.
She's going to be fantastic, Marsha Blackburn.
In other states like Tennessee, it's neck and neck. Hoping to change that, Representative Marsha Blackburn is full-on embracing Trump and appears to be pulling ahead of her opponent, Phil Bredesen. And according to a new Washington Post Schar School poll, the most contested battleground House districts still remain too close to call, with 50% of those polled supporting Democratic candidates and 47% backing Republicans. From now until November 6th, voters can expect to hear a lot of similar themes.
This will be the election of the caravan, Kavanaugh, law and order, tax cuts, and common sense.
The question is who can keep enthusiasm high enough to drive them to the polls. And that is the question. Well, Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins me now to break down some of the key Senate races. Abigail, let's start with Missouri. We were just talking about that. How big of a factor is Kavanaugh and the courts there?
Well, it's been interesting as I've covered some of these close races. In some states like Florida, it's not top of mind for voters, but in Missouri, it is just the opposite. It is a huge deal for voters. The judiciary, they care very deeply about it, as Congresswoman Ann Wagner told me just a few weeks ago that it will definitely be a make or break issue for people in Missouri. And take a look at what she told me.
It's huge. There are a lot of voters that I talked to, especially in my district during the last election. Some of them voted for Donald Trump, specifically because of the court, not just the Supreme Court, but what he would be able to do to impact the federal bench also.
And what's interesting is Democratic incumbent Senator Claire McCaskill did not vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh. She voted against him. And before that vote happened, she held a 3-point lead in what has been a neck-and-neck race. And after the vote, Josh Hawley gained, and now he is up about over 1% over McCaskill. So it definitely had an effect with the voters there. And but I talked to McCaskill a few months ago, actually in Missouri, and she told me that she feels like she's done a good job in Washington representing the people of Missouri, and she feels like she's done a good job working across the aisle. And so take a look. We have a thought from her as well.
That's what people really want. They want us to quit yelling at each other, and they want us to start working together. And I've got a lot of proof points that that's exactly the kind of senator I've been, and I'm hopeful that that will be enough.
And despite her going down in the polls recently, I spoke with her on the Hill about a week or two ago, and she says she feels great about the state of her race, but it is neck and neck.
Yeah, that Brett bounce giving him a lot of momentum. Yes, Abby, what do you think is the big thing, if there's one or two things to watch in this race?
Well, at this point, just over a week out from the election, I feel like a lot of voters in the state have made up their mind. And what I'm going to be watching is the final results in this election. President Trump won the state of Missouri by 19 points. And even though it's the midterms, the president is very much on the ballot. And I think seeing if Claire McCaskill wins this race, then that I think is a very telling sign for if the president is losing his grip on the state in 2020.
Yeah, Missouri, one of the key races. Yes. All right, well, as Abigail mentioned, 2016, President Trump won Missouri by 19 points. And in the lead up to the midterms, Josh Hawley has really aligned himself with much of Trump's agenda, including when it comes to religious freedom. I sat down with Hawley to find out why it's so important to him.
The country needs us.
He's a rising star in the GOP.
The culture needs us. Our society needs us.
And at just 37, Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley hopes to be the Show Me State's next senator. And he has President Trump's support.
Josh, our next senator, where is he? He's going to be a great senator.
And it's not just Trump. Hawley has support from other Republicans like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. One issue he's especially passionate about is religious freedom.
It rests at the very center of our Constitution, and the reason for that is religious liberty tells the government there is a line that you may not cross. You cannot tell us what to think. You cannot tell us what to believe, who to gather with, or who to worship. It protects that all-important right of conscience.
As Attorney General, he's fought human trafficking and gone after giants like Google and the pharmaceutical industry. McCaskill has taken notice and is hitting hard, criticizing Hawley for running for higher office after only 1 year in his current position.
I believe Josh Hawley has spent more time talking to the insiders in Washington the last 4 months than he has Missouri.
Hawley says he's ready for Washington, and with his family by his side, is standing strong on his faith.
Well, you know, I'm ready to serve the Lord, which is the most important thing. And my wife and I am blessed to be married to a wonderful woman who believes in the Lord Jesus with all her heart. We've got 2 little boys at home, and we feel like the Lord has called us to do our part in the public sphere.
And last night, McCaskill and Hawley held their final debate. We will bring you more on that later on in the show. Well, down in Texas, the latest figures show Senator Ted Cruz up 6 points to his challenger, Beto O'Rourke. A new poll from the University of Texas and the Texas Tribune shows Cruz with 51% of likely voters in the state, O'Rourke with 45%. Although Senator Cruz has a sizable lead, the Cook Political Report still ranks the Texas race as a toss-up. And the president campaigned this week for Cruz in Houston. With this narrow lead over his Democratic opponent, the GOP hopes the president's visit will help seal the deal come November 6th. Abigail has that story.
Got to vote for Ted Cruz. Democrats. The Democrats are a big risk to the American family. And our country cannot afford to take those kind of risks.
John Graves, president of Vision America, tells CBN News he's not surprised to see Republicans losing a grip on the conservative stronghold.
I've been telling people for years Texas is trending that way. Donald Trump won Ohio by 8.1%. He won Texas by 9%. And people think of Ohio as a purple state. They don't think of Texas as one.
Vision America encourages Christians around the country to vote. Their nonpartisan voter guide for Texas shows where both candidates stand on issues like the Supreme Court, right to life, and protecting religious liberty. Over the weekend, however, an unknown person made fraudulent copies of the guides, changing the text of the issues, and mixed them into piles passed out at multiple churches in Texas.
They snuck inside churches to deceive church members. And I've been around this for over 20 years. I've never seen or heard anything like that.
O'Rourke has seen support from some pro-life women in Texas, unhappy with the families being separated at the border. And the fake guide claims Senator Cruz supports this. Cruz told CBN News he strongly opposes the policy.
I can tell you when we saw the issue of family separation, I introduced legislation. I stepped forward and led legislation that would mandate families stay together, that we keep families together, that we keep kids with their parents.
The fraudulent guide also claims O'Rourke supports the right to life because he increased access to health care, without showing his stance on abortion.
I will only vote to confirm a Supreme Court justice who believes in a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body.
O'Rourke strongly opposes the president, saying he will vote for impeachment if elected and will not support a wall on the southern border. Cruz, on the other hand, has embraced the president, inviting Trump to headline the Monday rally, where tens of thousands gathered.
I am honored that President Trump is here endorsing and supporting my campaign, and I look forward to campaigning alongside him in 2020 for his re-election as President of the United States.
Yeah, this race definitely closer than Ted Cruz would like to see. Yes. Abigail, why do you think it is so close? I mean, Texas is typically deep, deep red.
Yes. Well, many Texans I talked to, and I asked that question, they pointed out that the population of Texas has grown by more than 3 million people in just under a decade. So the Texas as a state, it's changing. The people who make up the state, it's changing, and as a result, I think conservatives are losing their grip on that stronghold. And I also spoke with some people, some Republicans, who say they don't believe that we're that far off from seeing Democrats have a real shot at winning these statewide races. I think Senator Cruz has a comfortable enough lead that he will pull out a victory in this one, but it has been decades since a Democrat won a statewide race in the state. But I don't think we're far off from seeing these races get a lot closer in Texas.
Yeah, and you were just on the ground in Texas. You were talking about how there's really this movement of pro-life evangelical women who are actually supporting O'Rourke and not Cruz.
Yes, There are some women that we know of in Texas that are pro-life conservatives, but they say despite that they've been pro-life their whole life, they still are. Right now, they think the more pressing pro-life issue is reuniting these families that have been separated at the border. So they are going to vote for Beto O'Rourke because they are associating the family separation with the president and with Senator Cruz. As we saw in the package, I asked Senator Cruz about this, and he said that he has put bills forward to reunite this family. But I think it's just one of those things that we're seeing, that people they don't like the policy. Republicans are in power, and they are going to blame Republicans for that and not vote for Senator Cruz as a result. But when I asked Cruz's campaign, they believe that it's not. They believe that they have the majority of support from conservatives or from Christians and pro-life conservatives, and I think it's just a small amount of people.
Yeah, interesting trend indeed. Yes. All right. Well, Florida is another state with a particularly close Senate race. In fact, it's become the most expensive in the whole country. And Abigail, in addition to Texas, you've been all over the place, but you were in Florida too.
Yes, I was just in Tampa and I spoke with political analyst Susan McManus about why this race is particularly competitive.
Partisanship is very deep in this state. The stakes are high. Money is rolling into this race from outside the state, obviously because Democrats are holding on for dear life to that seat.
And Republicans are giving it their all to win it over. With 28% of the state registered as no party, however.
Governor Scott has a really tough time because he knows that he's got to capture a certain part of that no party affiliation independent vote, and he's got to continue to hold on to Republicans and at the same time try to think about some of those conservative Democrats in the panhandle that might vote for him.
McManus calls Florida the most difficult state for campaigning because of its diversity and size. Statewide candidates must be careful on sensitive issues like gun control.
The issue itself plays quite differently depending upon where you are in Florida.
For example, rural voters see guns as necessary protection, while urban voters associate the weapons with two deadly events still fresh in their mind.
They have to talk about issues that are important to Florida, how to fix things.
Republican voters argue Nelson has been in office far too long.
He's a career politician at this point.
Senator Nelson is probably a great man, but he hasn't been in Florida in a long time.
Democrats believe he's done a good job fighting for Medicare, Social Security, and protecting Obamacare.
I like his stance on the issues.
McManus says at this point, it's still anyone's guess.
Yeah, and of course, Hurricane Michael just devastating Florida here recently. Abigail, how do you think that will affect this race?
I honestly think that this devastation, it's catastrophic. I think it spells a lot of trouble for Republicans because these areas in the Panhandle, these counties are typically some of the highest voter turnout in the state, where races are won by statewide races are won by less than 1% frequently, and these counties are some of the strongest Republican counties in the state. And this could be very troubling because voting right now might not be top of mind for a lot of these people who just lost everything, not to mention their polling centers are changing, they're going to have trouble getting to the polls. So it could have a big effect in the race.
And Politico, they were reporting today that the president is nervous about Florida. Do you think Democrats could sweep? We have about 30 seconds left.
Yes, they very much so could win the governor's race and the Senate race. President Trump has campaigned strongly for both the Republican candidates there. He wants to see Governor Scott, as Senator Scott, helping him push his agenda in Washington, and he wants to see DeSantis win the governorship to help him in 2020 and getting resources in Florida. So yeah,
there could be a couple more rallies down in Florida. All right, Abigail, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, up next, why the California governor's race could end up in a surprising upset.
Watch live election coverage on the CBN News Channel, Tuesday, November 6th from 8 p.m. to midnight.
While much attention has been paid to the House and Senate, many states are holding close governor's races in these midterms. 36 of 50 states will elect governors come November. The decisions made on state levels will have a federal impact, of course. 26 of those newly elected governors will be in place for redistricting. That means they will have the power to veto or approve a redrawing of congressional maps. In California, it would be considered an upset if the governor's race goes to the Republican candidate John Cox. Polls indicate he seems to be in striking distance of heavily favored Democrat Gavin Newsom. CBN's David Brody has this story.
California is often described as the liberal left coast, but John Cox, who bills himself as a common sense businessman, is gaining enough ground to spark rumors of an upset. Some recent polling shows Cox only trailing Democrat Gavin Newsom by single digits. I spoke to Cox recently in San Diego, where he addressed hundreds of pastors.
Californians, I think, have always wanted some change, and they've always wanted to have a check on their legislature. And frankly, I think that's even more true now than ever, David. We've got a legislature that's off the rails. It's regulating plastic straws. It's not doing much about the cost of living and about the homeless situation and the housing crisis and the water crisis and schools that are now 47th in the nation. This is not the California that people remember.
We reached out to his opponent with multiple interview requests and received no response from the Newsom campaign. In a recent interview, the former San Francisco mayor said that Cox is too out of touch with California values.
I'm passionate in terms of my progressive principles and values, but I have no interest in reverting back to the old days of tax and spend and deficits. And so in the spirit of Governor Brown, I want to maintain that fiscal discipline, but with some emphasis on investments in early childhood education and the conveyor belt for all talent, our institutions of higher learning.
Cox argues that the state is facing a myriad of problems, including the cost of housing, high electricity bills, and the water situation.
Recently, the legislature imposed water rationing in a state that sits next to the largest body of water in the world. We're going to be imposing water rationing on the people of the state. They won't even be able to take a bath in this state in a few years.
On immigration, Cox says Newsom's views on sanctuary cities make no sense.
The major problem, frankly, is the country to the south of us, which has been ruled by corrupt governments to a large extent. It's not been able to get a hold of its drug gangs and its criminality, frankly. The last thing we want is that coming here and making our life miserable. So when we do things like the sanctuary state, we're sending a message that we're going to somehow put up with criminality. Well, you know, if you put up with criminality, you're going to get more of it.
Newsom says Cox has tied himself to President Trump's aggressive moves on immigration.
He's a bully. The fact is, California, we don't need to be intimidated. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. Our population is larger than 163 nations. We punch above our weight, and you don't react by kowtowing, as some cities and counties across the country and states have done. We protect and we preserve our values, and we defend our diverse communities, and we assert ourselves as only California can.
Cox came here to tell pastors how Christian values have shaped his policies. He grew up learning responsibility in a very unexpected way.
My real father did not take responsibility. My mother said she was raped. It was probably a date rape. You know, I don't know. I wasn't there. I was the conception as a result of that. And he married my mother, because I guess you did that in 1955, because you know he did do that. But then he left. And he didn't take responsibility. He never supported me, and my mother was left to fend for herself. I'd like to instill in not only the faithful, but people who don't have a faith, the idea that it really helps your inner being when you take responsibility and when you put yourself in the community and you help. So I'd like to see that as one of my missions as governor of the state.
We'll see if it's a winning message November 6th. For Faith Nation, David Brody, CBN News.
And we'll be right back with more Faith Nation. In the wake of the mail bomb sent to Democratic leaders this week, a renewed call for civility is being echoed across the country. It was an issue Missouri Senate candidates Claire McCaskill and Josh Hawley addressed in a debate last night.
I am very concerned, Mike, in answer to your question, about the culture of incivility and confrontation and even outright violence that we're seeing across the country. I think it is extremely concerning to see our politics come to this level.
That's the problem. This is a problem on both sides. We got to turn down the temperature. There are people being ugly on both sides. All the consumer protections that he's...
And although they agreed about the lack of civility being seen in the country right now, they didn't agree on how we got there. Hawley mentioned the tone of Democratic leaders like Eric Holder and protesters who have approached lawmakers in public places, while McCaskill spoke about the rhetoric of President Trump. Well, that is going to do it for Faith Nation this week. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you right back here on Monday.